Hi guys, welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. Um, First of all, thanks for watching. We missed our 6-month anniversary, so we're doing pretty well here. But thanks for watching again. To our YouTube viewers, remember that you can always watch us live Sundays, 9:30 Eastern every week. And if you don't make it into this thing, you can type your questions onto the Q&A so you can get your questions answered live. Tonight's broadcast is David Alt on stellar. Uh, I'm sorry, rating stellar images and tools for doing that. So I'm going to pass it right over to David right now. Thanks, David.
Sure. Hey guys, let me bring up my presentation here and share. All right, can everyone see this?
We can see it. We see your whole PowerPoint, including
Okay.
the file bar.
Okay. Do you see the presentation now?
I still see the entire PowerPoint screen.
Okay. Let me see if I can.
Share full screen and maybe whatever. I forget what it is.
All right. That look better?
Now I'm seeing a blank screen. Guess we should have tested this out 5 minutes ago.
So let me try this again. Try entire screen. See, blank
Yeah,
screen.
your entire screen is blank right now for some reason. You're not using. Are you using dual monitors?
No. In fact, I'm just using the laptop only.
Click better to learn more.
Hmm.
Let me think. Is there a display mode in PowerPoint? I'm actually opening up PowerPoint right now, so.
That's what I just suggested. If you go to share your whole screen and then go to presentation mode for PowerPoint, it should share across the whole screen.
Okay, so share entire screen. Do y'all see it?
No, it's still black.
No?
Try going to the next slide. No, nothing yet.
No? Okay, let me try one more drastic thing here. Sorry about this, guys.
No problem. We're kind of used to things going wrong and rolling with the punches. I'm trying to find out if there's a way to display PowerPoint in a little window, in which case we might be able to share it that way.
Okay, almost there.
David, try it now.
Okay. All right. So
I think it's gonna work.
all right. Can you all see that now?
Yes.
Excellent. So what did you change, Adam?
For some reason your video is disabled in the control room.
Huh. Okay.
Yep. And now I am hearing a reverberation on my thing. So I see Tim. I'm going to mute you because I'm not sure where it's coming from. But now I'm going to mute myself. So David, I think
right.
we're working.
Okay. So the first question you might ask is, what are stellar image metric tools, and why do we want to use them? They're pretty straightforward. They're just programs designed to characterize important information about an astronomical image. There are several statistics that are typically useful and that you see used in these programs. One of them is resolution. This is typically measured by determining the size of the stars. You'll see this reported as full width half maximum or half flux radius sometimes. Signal to noise ratio is also very important. Typically, we're trying to measure the actual signal to noise ratio, not just the signal or noise levels, but all three are actually important metrics. The star aspect ratio, this can be used to measure all sorts of things like tracking issues, optical defects, field curvature, and tilt. And all this information can be used to make decisions about what to do with our images. You know, maybe you have some that have really large stars, the resolution is very poor, or that the aspect ratio is very elongated. You can use these tools to identify and exclude them from your final stack so that your resulting image is more detailed. Sometimes some of the tools will allow you to use information about all the data you gather from the image to actually improve the final stack, through weighting and other methods. So there's a few tools I'm aware of that I've used, and we'll cover those today. And there's a couple that I am aware of but have not used, and I'm sure there may be some more out there that I haven't heard of. The ones I've used are Deep Sky Stacker Live, FITS Image Grader, Sequence Generator Pro, the image history function of it, CCD Inspector, and various PixInsight tools. I know Nebulosity 3 and MaximDL both have grading tools, but I know nothing about those. So before we get in here, I'm going to break this up into parts. So the presentation will kind of give a rough outline of what all the tools are and vaguely what they do, and then I'm going to do an interactive session with each of the different tools so we can see how they're actually used and how they work. So Deep Sky Stacker Live, it's great. It's free. You can't beat free. It's very good for monitoring your imaging output. I used this one extensively before I moved to Sequence Generator Pro for my image capture program. It can show you plots for full width half maximum, sky background, and overall score. You can see a picture of the actual program running here, showing the actual score values. These other two images, the one on the left is the full width half maximum, and the sky background levels. These images are all using the same set of data. This data was gathered over, I think, 3 different nights on one particular image I was working on. And so you can actually kind of see where the nights change. You see this first trend in the sky background where it kind of drops down as I moved up closer to the meridian and then kind of leveled out. And the next evening was not as good, and so it kind of started off worse and then got up to the meridian again. So you kind of see these changes in background levels there. FITS Image Grader is another free one. This one's made by Main Sequence Software, the same guys that make Sequence Generator Pro. And as you'll see, a lot of this stuff has been incorporated in their main program here. It's designed simply to check the star size and count. They use HFR instead of full width half maximum. That tends to be a little more robust in terms of the effects of seeing affecting the result. So it's good for their use in their real-time acquisition data. It allows you to mark frames and actually rename them or copy them to a specific directory. And you can write out logs, and there's a way to write out a CSV file to load up into a spreadsheet so you can make some pictures out of it as well. So Sequence Generator Pro Image History. It comes as part of Sequence Generator Pro, so it's not free. It costs about $99 currently. This is also made by Main Sequence Software. It integrated the FITS image grader data into this, so you can actually kind of see it looks very similar. You have a column for half flux radius for stars. They also log a few other things about focus position and temperature. And then you can see they actually have a little dialog that you can put in the main image window, so you can track it in real time over here, along with a graph to track PhD progress. They use these two information, the star count and the HFR, for you to judge whether or not, if you're manually focusing, whether you need to refocus and stuff like this. CCD Inspector is not free. It currently costs around $180. However, it can do a lot more than the previous tools. You can use it like the other ones to determine full width half maximum, star aspect ratio, and background levels. But you can also do contrast ratios. You can limit data based on the statistics and move it around. You can plot information about the images as a set or details about specific images. You can use it to measure field curvature, vignetting, and tilt. It can also do some real-time stuff, like you can use it to collimate your scope with the CCD in place. You can do this with a bright unfocused star, or sometimes with multiple stars. You can also use it to see how your current optics might perform with a different sensor. For example, what the vignetting or the star distortion might look like in the corners. There's also another little tool that comes with this called a full width half maximum monitor, but that requires maximum DL or CCD soft to run. It doesn't run with the generic camera settings, which we'll talk about a bit more. So on the left we have the limit form. So here are all the properties that the tool can measure, and then you can set limits to those. So in this case I set the full width half maximum to 4 and the aspect ratio to 26.5. You can see the images that show up in red in this image here, the lines that show up in red, those are images that fail the limits that I've set. So you can see this one had a 2.93 full width half maximum, so it was under the FMWH, but the aspect ratio was too high at 27, so it gets ruled out. Here's a couple plots. So this is a full width half maximum. It says versus date time. It gives you an index of the image that relates to the order that they're listed in here by file name. The same with the aspect ratio. You can actually plot them against other things as well. Here's some really nice features of it. This one on the left is a contour plot. This shows you how the star sizes are distributed across the surface of your sensor. So in the center of mine, the stars are a little bit smaller, and then towards the edges it gets a bit brighter. That means the stars are a little bit larger. And you can see it shows the range of star sizes from 3.84 arc seconds up to 4.08 on this particular image. So my stars are getting a little bit larger in the corners. Similarly, there's one for checking the aspect ratio. I don't necessarily trust this one as much. The aspect ratio is hard to determine, especially if you don't have a lot of stars, and this one I think only used 74 stars on this particular image. So this particular plot may not be the best here, but the idea is it's showing you the same type of thing, except for how distorted the star is from a perfect circle. There's a vignetting plot. Again, we're seeing the same type of effects. It's kind of messed up a little bit based off of the image because it's not just a straight open star field with a bunch of stars. There's some data in there, so it's a little shifted. But you can see overall the amount of vignetting in the corners is very small, probably around 5% in the very corners. This is mostly because the sensor I'm using is a 314E. It's a really small, 8mm diagonal chip. The next one is this curvature plot, but in 3D, and it's actually a little interactive window. You can actually change the position and look at the curvature of this guy at different angles. So the next one is PixInsight subframe selector. So again, this one's not free unless you own PixInsight already. PixInsight, I think, is in euros. I think at the current conversion, it's about $286. This is just one small aspect of PixInsight. And when you combine it with another script called full width half maximum eccentricity, it covers most of the same functionality of CCD Inspector, except for some of the interactive stuff like the collimation. You can get charts of full width half maximum, eccentricity, image medium, signal to noise ratio, as well as plots of those showing similar to what CCD Inspector shows here. You can also use it to assign more accurate weights for use in other tools like image integration. So you can direct it to focus more on the full width half maximum rather than just the noise metric that it uses by default. So here's a couple shots of the tool running. The left one shows the results table. So at the top you have all the images being loaded up, and the star fitting parameters, as well as the expressions I'm using to limit the data. And you get a readout of the data here. You can see that a couple images have been disabled, saying that they didn't meet the requirements. The next one shows some of the plots. Here again is the full width half maximum plot. This is the output panel. This is where you can control how you manipulate your data, whether you want to copy all your data that's passing your restrictions into one directory, where you just want to rename things or move them, whether you want to, what you want to append on there. If you want to do something different with your rejected data, put it in a separate directory, you can do that. You can also put in, you can see the weight keyword here. That's where you put in the name for the weighting that's going to be put in the fits header that can be used by the other tools. The full width half maximum eccentricity tool is pretty straightforward. You basically just select an image that it's going to run on, hit measure, and it goes through and looks at all the stars, measures what their size are, what their eccentricity is, and gives you a little report here showing some of that information. But then if you click this port, it'll also give you a plot of those, which we'll look at in a minute. So here are some of the subframe selector plots. So you can see full width half maximum, the image median, eccentricity, signal to noise weight ratio. You can see already that these look fairly similar to the plots from CCD Inspector. These are the ones from full width half maximum eccentricity. You can see the this is showing you what the values are of the full width half maximum across the image. This one is actually done, I think, on M33, which is why the center has actually got larger stars than in the corners. Ideally, just like CCD Inspector, you want to get these metrics, if you're trying to look for curvature and stuff, from an open star field rather than something that's got a galaxy or nebula in it. So here are a couple comparisons. This is with the same data. You can see on the left is CCD Inspector, and on the right is the PixInsight full width half maximum eccentricity plot. You can see they both are a little bit brighter in the middle, get darker towards the edges, although CCD Inspector shows a slight upturn in the corners here. these plots are fairly similar. You can see they all match up pretty closely. The PixInsight and CCD Inspector images plots are almost identical. The DSS Live is not quite as close to those. You can see it follows fairly closely, but there are some outliers that don't match up quite as well. There's a few other tools in here that are related to image analysis, but not directly dealing with stellar metrics, and I'll cover a couple of those as well. Aberration Inspector is a good one for looking at what the stars look like across your image, but kind of zoomed in towards the middle. So it basically just cuts your image up into 9 tiles and takes the far left corner, the center, the far right corner, and puts them close together so you can see what the stars look like near each other. It's a pretty straightforward tool. You just give it an image, how many tiles you want in your mosaic, what the size of the tile is, and stuff like that. The next few are what I consider kind of parts of the subframe selector stuff, kind of separated out. So like the contrast background noise ratio, this is a different way of measuring signal to noise, which focuses more on the target signal to noise rather than pixel signal to noise. So the numbers tend to be a little bit lower overall. Here you can see I've run it on a single subframe at top and a stack in the bottom. So you can see the contrast background noise ratio is 1.7 for the lower one and 3.48 for the stack, showing a clear difference in signal to noise ratio. The other two on this page, the flat signal to noise estimator and the dark noise estimator, these are designed to estimate how much noise you have in a single subframe of your calibration frames. It's actually looking at the stuff that is changing from frame to frame to give you an idea of what the overall noise level is in just a single frame. So here you can see I specify a couple flat frames or flat frames over here. It also requires a bias frame to subtract them properly, and it actually calculates what the gain of your camera is in addition to it. Similar with the dark bias noise estimator you're looking at for the temporal noise here. And in PixInsight, whenever you see these DN values here, that means it's showing you the ADU value. So what it is in 0 to 65536 values there. There's another one called noise evaluation. It doesn't have any form. You just get to it from the scripts menu, and it runs on whatever the active window is and just reports the noise. We'll look at that a bit more interactively. The basic CCD parameter tool is really nice. It really helps you characterize what your camera, how your camera operates, what its gain is, read noise, dark current. You can use this information for other things. It takes a couple flats, bias frames, some darks, and typically an area marking the center of all those things, and we'll give you a readout of what your metrics are. So you can see here the gain of my camera is about 0.185, the read noise is about 4.87, dark current is 0.001 electrons per second, full weld capacity is about 12K. And all these things are very useful for other purposes here. In addition, there's this calculated sky limited exposure. This is great if you take a sample image of what you're trying to target on and actually measure some of the background. It can give you an idea of how long of an exposure you need to go to not be read noise limited. So you'll put in some information that you got from the CCD parameter tool, put it in here, and give it your background image. In this case, I gave it a preview window within an image to select a specific location, and it tells me that ideal exposure time was about 7 minutes, 6 minutes, or 10 minutes, depending on which model you're using. The models themselves are a little bit different. The E-route limits are fairly similar, but the ANSI limit is a little bit different. It's based off of a limited total exposure time, In this case, I think it's about 4 hours is what I have it set to. So it's trying to tell you what your exposure length should be to get the maximum signal-to-noise ratio for a total 4-hour set of exposures. The last one is the statistics tool in PixInsight, which can give you all sorts of information, pixel count, mean, median, variance, standard deviation, mean absolute deviation, byweight, mid-variance, a whole bunch of things that can be useful for analyzing a particular image, checking between two images, things like this. These are pretty useful tools to have. Okay, that's all I have on the presentation part. So do we have any questions at this point?
No questions have popped up, but I do want to remind, first of all, if anyone in the room has any questions, feel free to ask them. But I do want to remind the people on YouTube that you can type into Q&A your questions or type them into comments, and we'll get to them. We'll call them out, especially with the upcoming interactive broadcast.
Okay. So let's get into the interactive part. And I'll bring up Deep Sky Stacker Live first. So can everyone see the Deep Sky Stacker Live?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So it's pretty straightforward. It asks for a monitoring folder. So I've got it specified already. So it's already listed up there. And all you do is tell it, I want to monitor this directory. Normally it's looking for whenever an image shows up, it'll start processing that data. In this case, the folder is already full. It's got 68 images, so I'll just let it go ahead and start doing that. And you can see as it's going, it's telling you what it thinks the score of a particular image is. As you can flip through full with half maximum, number of stars, sky background. What's interesting is that however Deep Sky Stacker Live does its score, it's highly dependent on the number of stars. So if you look at the two, flip between the two, they're almost identical. So it's weighting the star score much higher than anything else. I'm not entirely sure why they chose to do that, but regardless, it's still useful information. This being a free tool, it's hard to say no to and try it out. There's a few other things in here. You can see whatever the last image is and actually adjust it. And look through your image list and get the data in a table as well. You can also stack them on the fly. So if you're, say you're, actually doing some outreach event or something, and you want to just get a quick image back and actually have it improve in signal-to-noise ratio as the night goes on, you can actually use the stacking button. It'll actually stack all the images on the fly, and then you can look at the stacked image and actually change its histogram response. All right, any questions on Deep Sky Stacker Live?
No questions yet. I will say I used to use Deep Sky Stacker Live to monitor the live sessions and stack as it comes in, and it was a pretty cool tool for free, especially. So
Glenn, I never had any problem with the live stacking and auto guiding going on at the same time. The laptop I have wasn't the most powerful, but I never saw any issues there. Maybe if you're using a little netbook or something, that might be a problem, but otherwise I don't think it's an issue.
Yeah, I didn't have that problem.
So here's the fits image grader. So I'll do the same thing. I'll add in the list of images. There's some options in here. Before you run it, you can tell it you want to rename the images after grading or copy them to a new directory. If you rename them, you can choose whether it wants to add the half-flux radius metric or the score rating on there, whether you can prepend or append it and overwrite existing files if you're copying them. In this case, we're not going to move anything around. We'll just grade them. These don't take too long to run through here. In addition, there's this write CVS file. That's where it'll basically just dump out the data in a comma-separated list. And you can load that up into your favorite spreadsheet program and do whatever you want with it. For example, if you're using this and you wanted plots, then you could make your own plots that way. Something else you might notice is that the HFR values in here are a lot smaller than the ones from like Deep Sky Stacker Live, and that's simply because it's a radius rather than diameter that we're measuring. So the full width half maximum is reading the width of the star at the half of the peak. This is measuring the radius of the star at half of the flux. Because you're using the flux, it tends to be a little bit more stable in seeing in variable seeing conditions. All right, so it's done grading, and you can sort your list by name, half flux radius. So you can see this particular image on the 25th of October, frame number 32. It says the largest star, so it's the worst case. And this one on the 21st looks like it's the best. The score is opposite of that. Looks like this one, frame 26 on the 25th of October, was the best. And you can do things like, based on the score, this one's really low. Yeah, I'm not going to include these guys in my final image. I'll exclude a few. Any other questions on FITS Image Grader?
Not yet.
All right. Yes, it's FITS only. I don't know what support they have, if they can do things other than 16-bit unsigned integer FITS, or if they can do 32-bit or 64-bit floating point FITS or not. So this is CCD Inspector. So I've already loaded up and measured the data here. It takes a little longer than the other two, I think, because they're measuring more data than the other ones. There's some settings in here. I have my image scale and information about my camera populated already. That way, whenever it loads images in, it knows what image scale these things are, so it can report things in arc seconds rather than pixels. There's some other things in here about how you what camera control software you're using. If you're using CCD Soft or MaximDL, you can actually go out and access the camera directly. If you're not using those, you can specify generic. If you do, it'll look for a particular folder that it will monitor, similarly to Deep Sky Stacker Live. And whenever a new image comes up, it'll read that and process it. And it does that specifically for things like the collimation or the full width half maximum monitor. Although this guy relies on MaximDL or CCD Soft to work. But the collimation can actually use that generic camera setting. The collimation stuff is pretty interesting. I guess we can't run it here, but it gives you a little plot showing, actually, let's see if we can bring it up. Okay. So as images come into that folder or as they're acquired, you'll see this little line move left or right around the circle, kind of indicating, which screw you should be turning, assuming that you have 3 screws to use to collimate your mirrors with. So this is And as you turn it, you'll actually see it change as the new images come in, so you can know whether you're going the right way or not, which way you need to turn to get this thing to line up. And this can all be done with the camera in place. So if you're trying to, say, adjust you think the focuser is the part that's tilted, and there's a tilt adjustment on it, then you can actually do that with the camera in place instead of trying to do anything with the optics themselves. You can view an image, so this is what CCD Inspector views. I think it has some ways to animate through. You can actually step through images one at a time. You can basically see the noise pattern change, but not much else.
David, could I ask a question about the collimation?
Sure.
Have you used that to actually collimate an SCT on the fly?
I've used it, but I've not found any issues to correct so far. So I haven't actually done the collimation with it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was wondering how responsive it seems in like the exposure times they suggest for it.
They're not too bad. The time that I tested it, you do need a pretty bright star field so that you get a lot of stars in one frame in a short exposure time.
Mm-hmm.
And that are, I was using, I think, 3 seconds or something like that, and I think, I don't remember what open cluster I used, but I put it on an open cluster and went through that.
Yeah, even Eric's asking about the collimation tool.
Right. So let me see if I can do that. I had a way I was trying to do this earlier.
Yeah, so there's a defocused, and then there's an in focus I guess collimation. Is that what I saw?
Yeah. So let me remove everything from here, and we'll set the real-time folder to that location. And what I'll do is
I'm sorry, I'll just say this. I know from experience that you need a nice even star field for collimation with CCD Inspector. Don't use an image of a galaxy or a nebula or something. It needs to be just a nice even star field.
Yeah, there shouldn't be anything else in the field of view that you're looking at. So we'll do this. We'll kind of cheat and make it think that it's got incoming images. Okay. So as images come in, we should actually see the pointer jump around. We'll ignore that for now. So yeah, not a lot of stars. It needs hundreds of stars here, but and this is going to be a bit of a mess because these images have data in them. But you can see as the images come in, the pointer kind of moves around a little bit. And with each image, you'd actually be able to go in and turn the screws and watch what this little bar does until it's centered. And you should actually see the bar shrink. It's telling you the direction and the magnitude. At this point, the magnitude is large enough that it's kind of off the edge. For this, the stars are in focus. The A, B, and C is not having done this on my scope. I'm not sure which one it's going to correlate to. You'd have to turn one and find out which one it's affecting. But it's pretty straightforward because it's interactive and your stars are in focus and everything like that. You've got a lot of flexibility there. If you make a little turn in the wrong direction, it's pretty easy to back it off and then go in another direction until you're getting it fairly close.
Yeah. And I think the real benefit of this is you're doing it with your CCD camera on.
It's exactly right.
Yeah, if you're apprehensive about taking your CCD camera off for whatever reason, I always feel like I don't want to take my camera off. You're doing it with your CCD camera on. I've used MetaGuide, which I actually really like, but you do have to use a video camera as opposed to the CCD.
Right. And Eric, yeah, you have to do the collimation exactly how you would in any other form. So if you loosen one screw, you want to tighten the others, right? So that part's no different. The same thing, it does the same thing for the one-star collimation, except that you're expected to have a nice bright star in the field of view, and then you'd have your image defocused. There's a rating for how defocused it needs to be, and I'm not sure where that is. It may say in the help documentation, how defocused the star needs to be. But there's a minimum and maximum size that you want to use when you're defocusing your star. But otherwise, the actual readout looks the same. You'll see the same chart here to adjust the screws and everything. Yeah, you definitely want to use a star field with a lot of bright stars. Ideally, you want it pretty much directly overhead so that you're not dealing with any kind of pull one way or the other. And yes, it's in focus. If you're using the multi-star collimation, you want in focus stars on a bright star field with nothing else in the field of view. Any other questions on the collimation part?
I don't think so, but that was interesting. Yeah, I know. We have both of our attention. And anybody with an SCT is like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's really powerful. Like I said, it's kind of picky on the star field you have. You need to have, I think it complains anywhere below 300 stars, right? So you need to have at least 300 easily found stars in the field of view that are not saturated. So it's not the easiest task to do, especially if you're at a high focal ratio at f10 or something like that. That becomes difficult. But and you want to do as much as you can, to keep tracking errors and stuff out of the picture as well. So probably around 3-second exposures to avoid seeing issues, but probably not much more than that. Otherwise, you might start seeing tracking issues come in. I think HA would be really tough because you're going to have to go for long exposures. And I don't think you want to be guiding either. I think you just want to let it track and deal with averaging out the seeing and tracking issues by using the short exposures. Anything else, Eric?
They do, I think they still have a demo to download, CCD Inspector. So
Yes,
you can
they
download
do.
the demo and try it out. But demos in astronomy are like kind of dangerous. Well, in acquisition software, it's worse than buying new equipment because you'll never get any clear skies till the demo runs out.
Where do you live, Eric? Might be a long trip.
He's in a cloudy zone. Yeah, he's in a cloudy zone.
Why would I want to go to Illinois? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the other metrics that you can do with CCD Inspector. So we'll look at a couple things. So you can look at the curvature of a single image. It's a little bit better if you actually average in several. So I'll take a group of images that were done on the same night, relatively close to each other, and I'll look at the kind of curvature averaged over those images. So it'll measure all of those together and give me a plot. So it kind of averages out a little bit. So you can see there are more stars used in this total image here. So you get a little more accurate measurement of the change in the star sizes at the corners. And you'll notice that as I move my cursor around, it pops up a little window showing what the size is, the modeled size is at that point on the sensor. So towards the corners, I'm getting up to 3.18. 3.19, maybe a little higher. Yeah, a little higher in this corner than the others. The curvature is not very severe, 7.6%. It does show there's a little bit of tilt, and the collimation number, I don't know what to make of that. In these, I see it jump all over the place. My guess is it's not very accurate simply because I do have other stuff in this field of view rather than just stars. The 3D plot is similar. It's taking a little while.
That collimation number, that's where I went awry. If there is a galaxy or anything in the field, or it's not just an even star field, then that collimation number is just going to go all over the place.
Right. I'm not sure if this one wants to come up. I'll see if this didn't crash it anyway. We'll try it with just one image. I don't know if this is the video tools or what that's messing this up, but it doesn't want to display the interactive 3D plot. You can also, if you click on the charts, it'll give you the similar things that we've seen in Deep Sky Stacker Live or the subframe selector. You can look at full width half maximum, aspect ratio, background levels, and you can actually plot these against different various things. So full width half maximum versus contrast ratio, things like this. I haven't found too much use for doing that. I just generally, look based off of the time and date. If you've run the curvature on each one, you can get a plot of the curvature, but you have to do it on all images, otherwise you don't get any information there. There's also another one here called extrapolate, and this is the one that gives you an idea of how your particular optics might work with another sensor. So you can look at curvature, vignetting, aspect ratio, and then you can change what camera you're using. So say I used look at a APS-C, approximately APS-C size chip here, and you can see that the curvature is not that bad. It doesn't change too much between them. The aspect ratio it thinks is going to be really bad in the corners, and vignetting, again, not too bad, about 90% drop towards the corners. So it's a good way to model, based on your actual information, how another sensor might work with your particular optics. The aspect map is another similar thing. It's trying to measure tilt based off of the aspect ratio of the stars. Again, with the data that I've got in here, it's probably not the best. I didn't have time to actually collect data on a star field. It's been so cloudy around here. The limit alert, you can see, you can just change the values in here. Say I wanted to be a little more permissive and, allow some pretty fat stars in there and a lot more aspect ratio. Now I only have 2 images that exceed that data there. Not sure what I did there, but it also has the ability to reduce your images before measuring them, so you can actually subtract darks and biases, so you can actually specify where a master dark and master bias is. So it'll actually reduce your images, calibrate them. It won't do flats, but it'll subtract the bias and darks from your image. All right. Any other questions about CCD Inspector at the moment?
Not that I see.
All right. So let's now move to PixInsight. I'll bring up subframe selector. So I've actually already loaded in or specified the target frames here. And I've put in my information about my image scale, what the gain of my camera is. It's a 16-bit sensor, how I want my data represented, whether it's in electrons or ADU. So you can specify that, and the star detection stuff. This is typically, if you're using PixInsight, these are the settings that you would use whenever you are doing your registration of your images. You'd want to use the same values here. The interesting part comes in here where you're specifying what an image needs to meet in order to be approved. I'm specifying that the noise can't be over a certain level. Same with eccentricity and full width half maximum. There are other things that you can add in there, and we'll talk about those as well. And then the weighting, I'm using the signal to noise ratio weight, but you can actually do a combination equation in here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it to measure these. That might take it a little bit longer. Are there any questions while it's running that?
No collimation tools in PixInsight, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no live tools in there. This is one of the problems with the scripts, is that they lock you out of interacting with anything when you're using the script. So I can't actually go off and show you other things while this is running in the background like you can with processes.
Yeah, we've discussed that before.
Yeah. Scripts are nice because it's a lot easier to make them, using the JavaScript engine they have in there, but it's hard to beat the full process.
Mm-hmm.
You can see that in the log it's saying insufficient number of fitted stars already. As again, I'm using the same data I had before. It's still measuring quite a few stars, but not as many as it actually wants to get good data. For what we're looking at here, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. It would make some of the things like the eccentricity and stuff like that a little more accurate, but most of the things are pretty stable, even with fewer stars. So when we look at the full width half maximum eccentricity tools, that having a good number of stars is necessary to get a good plot. This is somehow running much longer than it did before.
I noticed my computer slowed down the other day, and I couldn't figure out why. And it was because I was working on those massive files that David uploaded for the group, and I was like, why is it so much slower than usual? And I look at the files, and they're 8,000 pixels across, and I had like 20 files opened on the screen.
Yeah, that's a lot of memory you're using right there.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
And then it was
almost done.
in PI and in Photoshop, so.
Oh my. Almost there. I think they're 32 frames in this last sequence here.
The YouTube viewers, you can always type into Q&A and we'll get to your questions.
Okay. So now we've got our measured data, and everything you do after this point, once it's been measured, can be done on the fly. So if you want to change what the weighting is based off of, say if you want it on full width, half maximum, you can see all the weights change on the fly, and you can actually do equations in here, where you say you want to weight, one more than the other. You can do some math in there to change the weighting, which is really important if you want to use this to actually help your image look a little bit better when you're stacking the stuff together in PixInsight. So you can see based on the data, based on the measurements I have here, which are pretty permissive, the same two images that we saw in CCD Inspector are flagged as not being approved. Let's minimize those, and then we'll look at a couple plots. So you can see the circles are all just the data that's there. It puts an X there if an image is not approved, and you can see here saying 66 out of 68 approved here. And you can just go through the plots. So you can see now with my new equation for the weight, it's focused mostly on full width half maximum rather than on the noise values. Eccentricity, again, the lower the eccentricity, the better the star shape. I don't remember exactly what the minimum is. I think it's 0.4 or something like that. It says in some of their documentation somewhere, what a perfect circle is. Signals noise ratio weight, which I think is, I'm not sure what that one's based off of. The median of the image. The noise almost directly couples with the median value. And there's some other ones in here. You can plot by deviation instead. So actually, if you want to change your expression, you can use full width half maximum deviation and specify the sigma away from the mean that you want to rule things out with, right? So you can see on the right the sigma is plotted there over here. So you can actually, say anything over 2 sigma I want to rule out, and that will certainly catch these 2 outliers, but it may actually grab a couple others in here too. You can save all your plots out as files as well. So once you're done, you've got everything in there. You can save all those out so you can reference them later on. And then once you're done, you've got everything to your liking. You get into the output. I've got stuff going into an analyzed directory, and I'm going to copy the data over rather than move it. And I'm going to append _A for approved onto that. For all the images that are marked as unaccepted or rejected, I'm not going to do anything with them. I'm just going to leave them alone. But you could, move the rejected ones into a bad folder or something like that if you wanted. The star map directory, if you hit the output maps, it goes through and actually will plot, where all the stars are in the images that it used for this data. I haven't found much of a use for that, but it might be useful for someone. This weight keyword is what's going to be put in the FITS header file if you're going to use this information later on. So the weights that we have here, that I have my equation specifying, those will be stored in, with this keyword in front of it. So whenever I go to image integration, instead of telling it use your noise information to determine what the weighting of your image is, I can actually tell it what the keyword is in the FITS header and say use that instead. So that way it will weight your images differently when it goes to stack them. And once you're done with everything, if you want to go ahead and move your data over, you just click on the output subframes, and that'll move all the approved files over or rejected ones depending on what you do there. And once you're done, you can hit dismiss and it goes away. So any questions on subframe selector?
This is more of a general question, but how do you use? I use subframe selector, and I still end up looking at every image. But I'm wondering, do you find subframe selector with the right parameters to be good for actually rejecting images, creating file lists without any user interaction?
I do have a little bit of interaction, so I use it as a good starting point. So what I typically do is I'll run subframe selector, and then I'll go and look at what the plots look like. And if I have some outliers in here, I'll go and look at those images to see, is it really as bad as it says it is, or is it some sort of data error in there? So I'll tend to look at those, but everything else that's approved, I'm pretty much okay with.
Mm-hmm.
So I use it kind of as a way to limit the data a little bit before I move on.
Yeah, especially, and that's kind of the same way I do it, especially over multiple nights when there were some bad ones in there. You need to kind of identify them.
Right.
And this is going to be a more general question. We could almost follow it up because I think there's other people that would have input on this. So if we wanted to bring it to the end, that'd be perfectly fine with me. But what are those specific factors that you find most important? Is it eccentricity? Is it full width half max? Or the combination? Is that your algorithm right there?
So my algorithm tends to be actually. Let me put the rest of it in here. I'll read it down a little bit. I think I typically use 2, 1. So I do something like this generally. So that gives me something that's mostly focused on the full width half maximum, with a little bit of the signal to noise ratio and some eccentricity. I haven't had a lot of problems with eccentricity in my images. My tracking is typically fairly good, so I don't worry about that one too much. But I want the noise to be weighted in a little bit, and the size of the stars to be weighted in a lot.
Right. So the noise being weighted in will probably factor in the background sky?
Yes, it's going to factor in, and in fact, if we look at the plots of this, it's going to factor in not just the background sky, which is just the median. So there you can see the median. It will look somewhat an inverse of the median. So if you flip the median upside down, you can see it gets a little lower here, then peaks up at the beginning. You kind of have a similar trend, a very, very slight similar trend where it increases a little bit and then jumps down, and not so much the second time.
Mm-hmm.
It is actually checking. I think it's actually looking at the is it the mean versus the standard deviation? So it's looking at the standard deviation of the background versus the mean of the image or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but this value is essentially what they are using in the image integration tool for their weighting.
Hmm. Do you see Alex's question?
Let's see.
So when you change your formula around, how does it usually affect which and how many subs are accepted and rejected?
So when I change the formula, that doesn't change which ones are accepted or rejected. The approval changes that. This changes how they are weighted when they actually go to stack. So if I just used this one alone, you could see that if some images would not be weighted very well, this image, 63 or something like that, would not have much input in the final image. But if I look at 63 here, it would probably be about average with the other ones. So it could be factored in a little bit more because it's full width half maximum. It's more in line with the rest of them.
In other words, they're all still accepted in the same rate they were before. It's just that they wouldn't have quite as much of a contribution to the end result if you had changed the parameters.
That's correct.
Now let me ask you this. Can you tell how much changing your parameters has to do with your final picture?
Yes, there are definitely differences. When I switch to using this equation, I actually see better resolution in the final image. The image is more noisy than it would have been otherwise, but I get more detail out of it because I've had it focus more on the actual star size. So you get more weighting on the stars, the images that have smaller stars in them.
That's interesting. You know, this would probably be a great way to identify your reference image, because I have trouble finding the best image in my stack.
Right, so yeah, if I look at my weight, you can see they're fairly average. There's probably one in here, this guy here, maybe that's 38 or something like that thinks it's the closest to the best image here. It's interesting that even though you know, this one has such a high weight it's excluded, my guess is that you know, the other factors here, the signal to noise ratio and eccentricity were really high, but the full and half maximum was very poor at the same time. So if you look at what's this guy, 65. So 65. Actually, I've done that wrong. Yeah, I don't want to look at full width half maximum. I've totally done that wrong. I think I actually want to use the 1 over. There we go. So now the weighting's a lot different. This guy's rated a lot lower. Sorry, I was looking at that wrong, and I think these are all a little bit off. But now these other images that have lower full width half maximum are rated very low. Image looks like 59 or so is weighted as the best one. And actually, I think we want to do the same thing with eccentricity. All right. Any other questions? And you're right, Adam. It's pretty good at identifying which is the best, based on what your criteria are. So you know, in this case, you know, I'm looking for full width half maximum being stronger than the other ones, right? So it has a larger impact overall.
Yeah, I'm still wrapping my head around what Mike Miller told us last week about manual integration in the reference frame. So now I'm thinking to myself, I have to really get around figuring out exactly what the proper reference frame is, because when you're manually integrating, then that becomes that much more important.
Yeah, I pretty much always manually integrate, and I use this method for determining which is the best image, although I've just started using this method recently to determine which one's the better frame. I had previously just been going off full width half maximum, whatever the lowest value was there, since I was shooting for maximum detail rather than highest signal to noise ratio.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other questions on subframe selector?
And Eric had asked, but subframe selector, I believe, is right below batch preprocessing script in PixInsight.
Yes, so under the scripts, it's under batch preprocessing, and it's currently the last one on the list. Some of the other ones we talked about, like the, let me bring up some of the data here. I'll look at the, so we bring up, stretch the image, and then I'll bring up the full width half maximum eccentricity plot. So this one will run pretty quickly. I think it said that it used, oh, I can't get to that. I think it said 800 stars or something like that. Once it reads all the information in, tells me what my average full width half maximum is, eccentricity and stuff like that, I can click on the support button, and that'll give me these other plots showing the variation of full width half maximum over the sensor and eccentricity over the sensor. Again, this is a little garbled with this data because I've got galaxies and stuff in the middle throwing it off. But if you have a nice open star field, it should work quite well. Most of the other tools are under the image analysis section. So the contrast background ratio, dark bias noise estimator, flat signal to noise ratio, noise evaluation, they're all under here. Under instrumentation is some of the others like the background CCD parameters and calculated sky limited exposure. Let me do the sky limited exposure one real quick so you can see how changing things like the ANSI limit affects it. It was 9.7 or something like that. 8. When I select this image to pull in the exposure time and everything like that, and you can see it gives me some values here based on what it thinks is going on. If I want to change the ANSI limit, say I want to do 4 total hours of exposure time, then it ups the what it thinks the default exposure should be for that data. I think this one may have been from my home, which is why the number is a little bit lower than from the dark sky site.
David, when you increase the total exposure, it increases the individual sub time?
Yes. So essentially it's saying that if you want to have a maximum of total 4 hours exposure time, to get the maximum signal-to-noise ratio, you want slightly longer subs as you increase that total exposure time. It's actually a little disappointing that it doesn't go higher than 4 hours. I've been curious what it'll do if you set it to 20 hours or something like that. But
yeah, and I believe the exposure limit is 1,000.
Yeah,
which is a problem I've run into.
Yeah, you can't do 1,800 or 3,600 or yeah. Although really it's supposed to be a test shot, and actually I've done it slightly wrong. Generally you want to select an area of background that has no stars in it. Instrumentation. Bring this guy up again. Now if I select the preview, yeah, you can see I'm just selecting the background now, and that ups the values a little bit. I'm not sure what this means in here, the minimum target ADU. There is some data in there, but it doesn't tell you what it really means. I assume that you actually have to go out and look up what the ANSI limit exposure calculator is and figure out what these things do. But I've never typically used the ANSI limit anyway. I typically use this first one, the readout limited value one.
Is that pedestal an ADU?
Yes, the pedestal is an ADU.
Would you do me a quick favor and yeah? So does that boost it? Just you boost the pedestal 100. Does it? Will it let you boost the pedestal 1,000?
No, it goes up to 300, I think, and that's it.
Okay. And is that camera dependent or is that just for all cameras?
I think it's supposed to be software dependent. I think it's assuming that you've added a pedestal in specifically in PixInsight.
Okay.
Because I think
my STF has a bias pedestal of 1,000, and I've always wondered about exposure calculators and that.
Right. I think they're assuming you're using a calibrated subframe, so that any pedestal is removed at that point.
Okay, gotcha.
Any other questions there?
I don't see any other questions.
Well, just for fun, I put in, well before there were any of these other tools out there, I had sat down and wrote my own little program for doing this. So I jokingly put in some information. It's free if anyone wants to try it. It's similar to Fitz Image Grader or anything like that. It will almost certainly break if you use any other data other than the files I get from my Attic 314E, and it doesn't give you any plots or anything like that. But I was curious and found out that, lo and behold, when I put my data in a spreadsheet, its values actually look pretty similar to what I get out of the other programs. If I compare it to subframe selector, you can see the full width the star size is pretty close. Eccentricity, not so much. But the median and signal to noise ratio weights were pretty close as well. I was pretty pleased having something to compare it to, that it's actually not so bad after all. That's all I've got for you guys. If you got any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Well, my main question, actually, I had a ton of questions that you answered in your presentation, so it was a great presentation. I am curious if other people use specific weights and how they factor them in, because I'm always staring at my weights as they come in SGP. Anyone else paying close attention to their image grading?
I've been using CCD Stack for a little while now and using weights on those. I don't do a lot with messing around with how I actually I don't like put in different formulas, but I think you can do a couple little things to change the weights of them, and they've made a drastic difference for me for both the star shape and kind of some of the quality of, you can tell where clouds come in, but you don't want to throw everything out. So it helped a lot for me.
I've been to various workshops at various places in my time. I've seen 6 or 8 people, very good imagers, and they've gone over this particular topic as to how they select which of their subframes they'll use and which ones they'll reject. A surprisingly great number of them, I would say, of the people who I've spoken to, probably 3/4 of them have said that what they do is they show you all this stuff that you just showed us, and you did a great job showing us stuff. But then I think it was Hap Griffin, but it might have been Neil Fleming, says they use their Mark I eyeball. They just eyeball it, and if they like it, they do, and if they don't like it, they reject it. Now they probably they've got some experience where they can do that kind of stuff, but and they really are glad they have the tools probably. But I really thought that was funny that after they told me all that much about the statistics and this and that and the other thing and what you're looking for, what they said was they eyeball it. And I think maybe it'd be good if everybody also knew about the Blink Inspector over in PixInsight, which is...
That's a good point, and I meant to put that one in there, and I totally forgot about it. But we can show that one.
I'm your conscience.
Excellent.
Well, why don't you pull up? Can you you've still got PixInsight running in your screen share?
Yeah. Let me.
Good idea to pull up those 20 pictures and just run through them.
I would also point out if you live in Southern California, then you're a lot more likely to throw out frames than you are if you live in the Midwest or the Northeast.
Yeah. Although I haven't run the old imager out there for about a week and a half. I don't think. It's a combination of the moon and those cloud things like you guys have all the time.
Yeah, so the Blink tool is really nice because you can just scroll through your images. It has a couple ways to do the screen transform. It can go based off of the first image, or you can do an automatic screen transform on all images so that they're a little better equalized. I tend to use this one. It takes a little longer to process them, but once you go through, I really shouldn't see much variation other than a slight difference from dithering and things like that between frames. So you can see as I scroll through, the image shifts around a little bit. If you want, you can zoom in and actually look at stars. And you can even put it on a little loop, play through one a second. So I can watch them wiggle around and stop it if I want to on a particular one. So it's a great way for manually inspecting things. And Alex, you're absolutely right. Just like Adam and I were saying, I use this as a jumping off point for manually inspecting the data. If I've got 100 frames or so, it's difficult to just inspect all of them, but it gives you a way to kind of go through and find out which ones you want to look at.
I think that if you're still working with mounts that don't work sometimes and guiders that lose track of things or clouds that come in, this is a really good way to get rid of the exposures that are wrecked quickly, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So for example, if I flip back and forth between these two, you can see this one, the stars are a little bit sharper and a bit rounder. And then if I go back here, they're a little bit larger and more distorted. I was probably a little bit further out of focus, and there may have been some tracking issues that affected that overall.
So you would just X out that one, and it wouldn't be considered anymore at all in any of your other calculations.
Yeah, exactly right.
And it's got, down at the bottom, it's got little icons that can go save all the good ones over in a certain area and all that stuff.
Yeah, very similar to what you can do in the subframe selector itself, you can do manually here. Thanks for bringing that up, Alex.
Anyone else have any questions?
Someone was asking where they find the Blink tool. It's a process, I believe. Let's see.
I think it's just called Blink.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out which category it's in. It's image inspection, yeah, along with the statistics tool.
I sound like I know what I'm talking about in PixInsight. The fact is I know so little that the things I know I want to tell you about.
It's a fantastically powerful tool.
Yeah, Glenn's saying CCD Stacker has it as well. I feel like Blink should almost be required for all of our imaging runs. If we ever do again get into like the science of or science using our equipment, I think you can find some cool things in the Blink tool. Of course, you'll probably spend a lot of time chasing them down and chasing down things that may not be as exciting as you would have hoped, but it'd be a good mandatory use.
I found an asteroid using it once.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just by manually inspecting.
Did you discover it, or did you find a discovered asteroid?
I found a discovered asteroid.
Okay. Because you can actually, I mean, you can find them if you want to. You have to try hard, but and look for a long time.
Hi, David. It's Eric. I found a strobe light on a high-flying airplane one time.
That's pretty easy to do, too.
Yeah, I actually spent a good amount of time figuring out it was a strobe light. It was only in one frame. But getting back to the subject, you know, I would love to have a tool which really allows me to select and wait, but I'm afraid I fall into the category that Alec mentioned, is I just blink through them, and if something doesn't look right to me, I check it off and throw it away. And other than that, the other issue is how long should your exposures be and how many you should take. Whenever the object's in view and I'm out, I'm shooting it. And when the evening is over, if I have enough frames up more than 19 and less than 35, then I'm done. It's probably not very scientific, but it seemed to have worked out over the last couple of years.
We may have found an asteroid live over the broadcast. David also.
Yeah, I'm trying to find that right now.
But you're right. I always blink through my image hoping to discover something besides a strobe light.
If you go day to day, you can discover supernovae. I know of some tools that are in development that are going to do something like that for supernova discoveries. Kind of interesting. Really good idea. I see we have 6 live viewers still, but we are coming to the end of the formal presentation. I haven't seen any questions in Q&A. Eric, I'm going to mute your mic real quick. I think I'm getting reverberation. There
you go.
Did that help it? I think it did. There we go. But I do want to thank the YouTube viewers for coming, but I think we're going to end the broadcast now. You can get us next week. Actually, Josh is going to be presenting next week on beginner setups. Everything you need to know about getting a new beginner imaging setup, or not necessarily beginner setups, but just a setup. So thanks for coming, and we'll see you next week.